Maciej, good to get you back on Real Vision. It's been a while since we've talked about Iran. Iran's a place that I've been intrigued with ever since I went there back in, 2011. And I started looking at it and realizing it was like there's a big, vibrant economy that's not connected to the outside world very effectively, and was one of these opportunities that felt like Russia did in 1990 or the opening of China, where it's not a third world economy. It's actually quite advanced, but there's no investment capital into it really. And you're one of the few people who invest in the market. What's your top-down thesis? Why did you start investing in Iran?
Well, I got interested in 2016 when the nuclear deal was signed. And I never looked at it before. I mean, I knew obviously about Iran as in Persia and thousands of years of history. I did trade many frontier markets from Vietnam to Kenya to Philippines and so on. China A-shares very early, but Iran was always something that no one could touch. So we didn't do anything. In 2016, I got interested. I had never met an Iranian in my life prior to my first trip there, actually. So I had no bias. I was absolutely, okay, let's just see what's there. I realized that, okay, the stock market is, stock market was later, but the top-down macro picture was amazing. So you have this big country, like right now, almost 84 million people, where, the demographic structure is beautiful. I mean, median age, 30 years. You have probably 25 million people employed, 2.5 million unemployed, a couple of million students, and then kids up to 18 years old are another 25 million. So this will become the next wave of employment coming into the market over the next 20 years, 18 years. And then they are educated, right? So you start reading about it, and you start meeting people, and you sense that the level, the quality of people that you're meeting is amazing. I mean, look, on my first trip to Tehran, I didn't know anyone there. I just scheduled a couple of meetings with brokers and with local banks to open accounts for myself. And then I was going by myself to the local restaurants. So, TripAdvisor, best restaurants in Tehran, and I was on my own. So waiters were asking me where I was from. I said, from Poland. So then they started talking to me about Polański, Kieślowski, so the Polish film directors. And one guy started chatting in Esperanto because it was a Polish Jew who invented Esperanto. So you guys in Poland probably know something, right? And it was his hobby, right? And so, that's funny, but that just shows you, I mean, the level of people that you're meeting. So this was great. Then the economy. I knew that they had, the biggest combined oil and gas reserves in the world, but that was only 15% of GDP. So it's not your typical frontier market that when it opens up, they're going to start, producing textiles, right? No, they produce million cars per year, right? They have advanced manufacturing of many different products. Not all of them maybe are advanced. So the spare parts for aeroplanes are a big problem. So you want to avoid the domestic flights over there. But in general, so it looked as a big diversified economy that has been under sanctions one way or another, basically since 1979. So they missed on everything good that happened in emerging markets since then. So, globalization, access to...
Sorry for interrupting your video, but I have a very important message to share. At Real Vision, we pride ourselves on providing the very best in-depth expert analysis available to help you understand the complex world of finance, business, and the global economy. So if you like what you see on the Real Vision YouTube channel, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You should come to realvision.com and see how we're not leaving any stone unturned. From publishing more in-depth videos, live discussions, written reports, and our latest feature, The Exchange, where you get a chance to engage with experts, fellow subscribers, and learn from everyone's experience, which can't be wrapped in a video. It's an experience which you live and learn from. So if you go to the link in the description or go to realvision.com, it costs you just $1. I don't think it's something you could afford to be without.
One way or another, basically since 1979. So they missed on everything good that happened in emerging markets since then. So, globalization, access to foreign financing, interest rates going down. And they have a good potential. So not only this commodity resources, but human resources, definitely, that will allow them to catch up. I mean, for European companies, this is right now the best place to place their factories, to take advantage of very cheap and qualified labor. I mean, salaries are lower than in Vietnam. And after some time, this will become a very important consumer market. So, all this in 2016, plus the potential tailwind coming from the nuclear deal signed by the Obama administration. And then the most exciting thing for me was obviously the stock market, because it doesn't happen too often then that you go to a new country that is opening up and there is something to do for you as a portfolio investor, right? Normally you can go and build a factory, maybe like launch a startup, right? And here you had 600 companies listed, daily liquidity of around $100 million at that time, and the lowest valuations in the world. And I mean, 5 times earnings, maybe 4 times earnings, no debt, no one has any debt. Those earnings are growing. The market is super inefficient because it's dominated by retail investors. There are no foreign investors. It's less than 0.5% of the market cap. And on top of that, the country has the worst PR in the world, right? So it's surely mispriced, right? So that on my first trip, I opened a couple of brokerage accounts for myself. I opened a bank account. Then I transferred £10,000 just to test if it's actually working. It worked. So I decided to quit my job and launch a fund that will give people access, Western investors access to this market very early, before all the big institutional investors are allowed to trade.
What most people don't realize is actually foreigners, not US, but Europeans, are free to open a brokerage account. But the pain of doing it and how to manage that. What was really interesting is my introduction is I was invited by one of the the Anglo-Iranian investment banks to go on a tour, because I'd written about it saying this is the world's cheapest market, and same conclusion as you guys. Holy shit, the demographics are incredible. What's an amazing place. And I met a guy on a bus in Iran who is one of the smartest people I've ever met, this Italian count. And I said, what are you doing here? It was a relatively older gentleman. He said, what are you doing here? He goes, look, I was in Russia in the 80s. He goes, I know this stuff, much like you're saying with these small frontier markets, but this is actually a big frontier market that everybody's not had. So he said, well, I saw they were launching this investment bank, so I reached out to them, and as their first customer, I decided to ask them for a stake in the business. I said, why did you want that? He goes, well, I quite like being a gatekeeper, I take tolls. If this is the only vehicle allowing people in, I want a part of it. I said, so what did you actually do? He goes, oh, well, we bought we made a bunch of equity investments. He said, but they kind of ran that. I didn't even really look at it. I said, so what were you doing? He said, yeah, I didn't really want a piece of an investment bank, and I didn't really want the equity portfolio. I wanted direct access, and I knew that they could get it for me. I said, okay, what did you do? He said, I bought 40% of the second largest insurance company in Iran for a P of 3. He goes, It had a dividend yield of 25%. He said, it threw off so much cash. I said, what did you know about the insurance company? He goes, the Iranian insurance market goes, nothing. He goes, I just knew it had the second biggest balance sheet and it was just going to throw off cash. I said, so what did you do with the cash? He goes, well, I bought 40% of one of the sugar companies. Just from the dividends and just the flow. And he was paying Ps of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, literally things that nobody else has ever seen in their careers, except early investors in Russia and maybe very early investors in China. And then I realized how big this opportunity was, that this was a long-term secular opportunity. And like you, I was super bullish 2016 with the Obama signing the deal, and then it all went on hold. So what happened to you? It all goes on hold. You must be going, oh, shit, I just started a whole business on this. What do I do?
Yeah. So look, a lot of our peers. So there were a couple of other funds that were launching around that time, and they all gave up basically. So I know that people were liquidating their position. So we decided to stay because, well, we looked at it very long term. I looked at it very long term. So I think this is not a trade. This is a thing for the next decade at least. And we wanted to have exposure, but also there's quite a lot of history of the local market that you can study, and you can see how share prices have behaved over the last 15, 20 years through different currency regimes and different inflation regimes and so on. And it looked that when you're buying at the right valuation, you should be fine. Obviously with volatility. So what hit us in the first year was the currency dropped by 70% in our first year of operations, right? So we managed to lose only around 15 in euro terms because we managed we figure out how to indirectly hedge the portfolio. But we basically had to redo the whole strategy from scratch. So I was starting with basically what you were describing. So I had this utility company that was trading at 4 to 5 times earnings, paying most of its earnings as dividend. So it had around 20% dividend yield. And the best thing was that most of its contracts were priced in euros. So it was supposed to be also hedged in euros. And no debt. I mean, utility without any debt, right? So we had those companies that we just loved, or some obvious takeover targets. You know, you're buying a company that makes small trucks, has 60 or 70% of the whole Iranian market, and it was valued at less than $100 million, right? It just it didn't make sense. So, but when things changed, when sanctions arrived, and basically when the currency started depreciating, we got rid of everything that we liked from the portfolio, and we just focused on one simple thing. We were building basic models of companies to understand who has the biggest sensitivity of EPS to the dollar price. And most of the market cap of the Tehran Stock Exchange is long the dollar, basically. Very often, you just have dollar assets that just happen to be listed in Tehran. So, you know, that's why when you look at the 15 years of history of the index, it has done pretty well. I mean, the main index is since 2008, and the average annual performance is around 13% in dollars. That's the total return. That's, you know, probably around S&P or maybe even better with bigger volatility, obviously. You know, imagine if when you're an exporter, the dollar rallies by 50%, your revenues go up by 50%, but your earnings go up much more because of operational leverage. So we were looking for those companies that have pure export exposure, no problem with sanctions, because some of them were hit by sanctions, but not all of them, and you know, highly geared to the change in the FX, and that worked in the worst quarter. When the real just went down by 50%, our stock portfolio in local currency doubled. So we were able to show after this quarter, you know, I think +1 in euros, which was super relieving, and it actually works. I mean, this is obviously no magic in it. The higher the dollar, the more competitive the exporters are. Some of them, if they are state-owned and sell to, you know, Japan or South Korea, they were hit by sanctions, so the volumes went down. But many of them operate in the region, and the region is actually quite a big part of the world. So Iran plus all the neighboring countries is more than 500 million people, and Iran is really well connected. I mean, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, you have 80 million people there, not producing much, but they consume. And they have to import most of the stuff they consume. So it very often comes from Iran. And then you have Pakistan, Turkey, up to Uzbekistan, where people speak Farsi as well as a second language. So Iran is well connected. Many of those companies export in the region. Those products are usually not affected by sanctions. the lower the real goes, the more competitive they are. So this was one thing that we learned how to hedge the portfolio basically. But then what we understood was that the biggest impact in terms of where the sanctions had the biggest impact on in which industries of earnings of which companies was on domestic producers. Why? Because imports collapsed. Not only because of sanctions, then because of real plummeting, then even Chinese producers were no longer competitive. But also it was difficult, to find logistics, to make payments, insurance, and so on and so on. So what that meant that in many product categories, like consumer staples, for example, local demand went to local producers. And the local producers found themselves in a situation where the competitors are gone, basically. So even though the market as a whole was not growing, those guys were gaining market share. And so we had a couple of ideas which companies could benefit. And the great thing is actually that you get a lot of data in Iran. So you can be really data driven. So you have some, hypothesis, and then you can just check it, wait for the data and confirm it with the data. So we were building small positions and then waiting for monthly data. So what type of data you get? Obviously you get annual, quarterly, in a similar format. These are not the same reporting standards, but similar enough. But then you also get pretty granular monthly data where you get sales updates broken down into main product categories and then into volumes and prices. So every month we could see whether those companies, what was happening to the volumes, what was happening to the prices, whether they were able to raise them faster than inflation or not, and adjust our portfolio accordingly. So it was a absolutely wild ride during the sanctions and currency depreciation. But the system adjusts; those companies adjust to this in this environment.
Okay, so now we've still got a relatively closed economy there. Do you think the change of government in the US is going to reopen this? Are we coming into the big opportunity that you and I have been waiting for in Iran?
So that's the big hope, and I think so. Yes, it's not only Biden; it's also the Senate. So you have the proper blue wave, which should make pushing through legislation much easier. But with Iran, everything is complex. I mean, Iran is a complicated situation, and it
has been for 2,000 years.
So this won't change. I think this won't change. So there may still be a couple of turns down there. So okay, you have the right administration in the U.S. So it's a huge change versus Trump, obviously. But you're gonna have election in Iran. Presidential election is in June. We know that Rouhani cannot run because he already had 2 terms. So there will be a new president. We don't know who might become the president because they have those very special rules around elections. So it's supposed to be a democratic election, but the candidates have to be approved by a special council. And this council only announces its decision around 2 weeks before the election. So then there is no time for campaigning. It's really odd, but this is how it works there. But what we know is that most likely the new president, potentially also the new cabinet, will not have such a strong relationship with the ex-Obama negotiators, which are basically on Biden's team at the moment. So it will be interesting to see if they try to make something happen prior to the Iranian election, but probably not a new deal, because I would expect the US to want to secure something strong and long term. So you need to have a new government in place. But they may try actually to perhaps influence the election somehow, to maybe tilt it more towards the reformist types who would want to have a deal. So they could start with unlocking some funds that Iran has in countries around the world that were never paid for the products that they offer. So it's they have 8 billion in South Korea, a couple of billion in Japan, and so on, and they are lying in local banks that are just unable to send it over. Or they could introduce some temporary sanction waivers, for example, for oil sales. I would expect to see some positive moves from the US towards Iran, but a new deal or going back reactivation of JCPOA probably will have to wait for the new Iranian government.
What's your sense of talking to Iranians on the appetite for reformers versus non-reformers? Because that's always been the flip. Yeah. And Rouhani's been a reformer in general and been generally moderate. What do you think the feeling of the country is right now? What do they want?
So first of all, when it comes to politicians, I don't think that the real difference is so strong that you have really reformist camps and really conservative camps. I think they're all part of the same establishment with a bit different faces. At the end of the day, everything is up to the supreme leader, every major decision. But when it comes to the mood on the street, people were super optimistic under Obama, and then they got tired. So during the last election to parliament, the turnout was really, really low, which was in strong contrast to the presidential election before. And people just got tired because they believed in the reformist camp, they believed in JCPOA. This didn't deliver, so they didn't vote again. So they said, it doesn't matter really, and that's why you have a very conservative parliament in Iran right now. So I think this could change if Biden. I mean, imagine, we know the rhetoric of Trump, very aggressive, like people are almost expecting a war every week, right? So now imagine Biden going out, smiling, right? Saying, look, guys, if we play this right, we may have a deal at some point down the line. I think this would be a huge change that would bring back the optimism and the faith that things could improve.
What is the relationship? Is there any relationship what is the relationship between Saudi and Iran? Because that's always been a stumbling block for the region. And also Israel and Iran. Where are those right now?
Saudi and Iran is something ancient, I see, because these are Shias and Sunnis, right? So same Muslim religion, but two camps who are still arguing who is the most important imam and have some really fundamental differences when it comes to religion. It's some detailed aspects. This is one thing, but another thing is that my sense is that Iran used to be a superpower in the region, and perhaps some countries around in the region would prefer that Iran stays in terms of the size of the economy as it is, so would not want to see it grow and develop, hence high tensions. But this is what they would. So my view is that they may want to see the status quo remain as it is, but they would not. There would not be appetite for a big conflict in the region. Last year, there was maybe not a conflict, but it went towards a military conflict maybe. So when the tension rose and Iran, well, we don't know if it was Iran, but people assume it was Iran, sent drones to fire at Saudi Aramco refinery. And it shut it down basically. And that's most of Saudi's GDP, such an easy target, right? And this is just a refinery. All the countries in the Gulf region, the really important targets are, water desalination tanks, electricity, power plants, right? So they understand that the risk for each of those countries is huge of having like an open conflict in the region. So I don't think that there is a real appetite to go to war from any of the Gulf states. And actually the relations improved. I read about some diplomatic missions that went from UAE to Tehran. Then Saudis started talking about having a ceasefire in Yemen. So there was actually a progress after those tensions. Now there seems to be some progress with Qatar as well. So I wouldn't expect any problems, like real problems over there. With Israel, I don't know. Israel has been vocal and consistent about one thing: that they don't want any other country to have nuclear weapons in the region. And I believe that they could do anything to make sure that this is the case. However, when you look at the relations between the populations, the biggest Jewish population in the region outside of Israel is in Iran.
And it's the oldest in the world outside of Cochin in India.
Yeah, exactly. So I visited many mosques, churches in Iran, in different cities in Iran, Jewish synagogues, and there is no police in front of them. I mean, everyone is doing his thing, right? I mean, there is people are tolerant, and there is no problem with other religions. So I don't think there is a problem, like a fundamental difference in views of the world between the populations. It's the government thing, and also going back to Saudi and Iran. Saudi has a very young population. It's the same for Iran, and the young generation, they don't really relate to the same values or the same historical events as the older populations, which is visible, I think, in Iran when it comes to the how young people approach the revolutionary values versus the Western values and so on. I think it's the same in Saudis. So this could make a shift. I'm not saying that I would expect some big changes, some massive changes to a different situation, but gradual changes to adjust the systems to work well for the younger generation. I think this will be happening.
You can see it in Saudi. MBS is focused internally now on trying to change. He needs to create job opportunities for all the young people because they've got the same baby boom across all of the Middle East, essentially.
Yeah.
All of the Islamic world essentially has a baby boom, plus India and a couple of other countries. And Saudi looks like it wants to rebuild its economy. So it doesn't feel like it really wants to create geopolitical tensions with Iran. I think, as you say, if Israel can broker a deal that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons, but can have nuclear energy, maybe that's okay. Maybe the region can settle. Where does Turkey play into this as well? That's the other regional superpower.
Just one comment about Israel and US. I think in the future, most of foreign investment will be coming actually probably from the US and Israel, directly or indirectly, because they understand, the opportunity of the local market. Sorry, you're asking about Turkey?
As well, yeah. So Israel, yes. So you think direct investment? I think the Israelis can use it as a country to manufacture cheap product in as well, because the skill set is very high. And Israel, is growing great guns right now. Turkey. How does Turkey fit into that? That's the other regional superpower. It's always historically been Turkey, Saudi, and Iran, and I guess Israel.
And now, to some extent, Russia as well, which is
that's next
present in the region.
I'll ask you about India, China, and Russia. But first, Turkey. How does Turkey play into this? Because they've historically had a trading relationship, and a lot of banking is done through Turkey.
So yes, that's why many Turkish banks are on sanctions list. But look, Turkey and Iran are interesting because they are the same size in terms of the country, the same size in terms of population. But I would say the opposite in terms of trade balance. So Turkey is a large diversified economy, but they have to import all of its energy needs. So every month, whatever they do, they need to spend a couple of $1 billion on getting energy into the country. So Iran is similar size, and its economy could be, the non-energy economy could be same size as Turkey, meaning 6 times larger than it is right now. And at the same time, they have those large oil and gas resources. And in a situation without any sanctions, they would be receiving a couple of $1 billion per month just from selling oil. So this is the natural connection between those countries. So Iran could be supplying energy to Turkey, like to the rest of Europe. they have. I don't think that Turkey is perceived as a major partner for Iran inside Iran. They do have common interests in certain regions, in Syria, in the Kurdistan regions or north of Iraq, where the Kurdish minority goes from Turkey to Iraq to Iran. And I guess none of those large countries would want to see a new country showing up there. So they have some common interests there. So now, for me, those countries, one way or another, cooperate or not cooperate. But that's it. I don't see any stronger connection between them.
And India and Iran have historically had strong ties in the past. I mean, obviously, the Mughal emperors of India were Persians.
Yes.
What is their relationship because I mean, Iran has all the oil and gas that India needs. It has a bunch of things that India can do with. It seems like it's an obvious place. They both have these young populations, potential high growth, slightly inflationary economies. What's the relationship like between India and Iran right now?
Yes. So look, the energy trade is dominated by sanctions right now. So Iran, in order to sell oil, they keep on selling oil. We just don't know how much because most of it is smuggled, basically. So, and to actually entice someone to buy it from them, they need to offer discounts. Maybe they are selling to India, for example, at a discount, and India may be buying. But also, other countries were more eager to buy Iranian oil and potentially face some sanctions consequences when the oil was much more expensive. So then this discount mattered more, especially for countries like India, where high oil prices always have an impact on their currency, on their current account, and the currency, and then inflation and so on. But what they did, I remember that initially when the sanctions were introduced, Iran was able to sell to India, keep on selling to India, and was getting paid in barter in any other product, like even rice, just not to use dollars or not to use the banking system, basically. And it was working fine. Then India was also building a port in south of Iran, just to go around Pakistan and be able to ship products directly to Iran and then to Afghanistan. So then there was a lot of cooperation. So traditionally, there's been India has been one of the biggest trading partners of Iran.
Yeah, and I just think as it opens up, it just becomes, it's a huge market. The other two interesting players, I mean, it's amazing. This whole, I don't know if you've read the book, The Silk Road by Peter Frankopan, which basically takes the history of the world basically from Iranian eyes, without being, it's not pro-Iranian, but it's saying, okay, if the world centers around here, what does it look like? It's fascinating. The other players in the region always have been Russia and China. What are they up to? China's basically allowed to freely trade because it doesn't care about SWIFT. Is that right?
So they have banks in China that are on sanctions list because these are the banks that do all the sanctions activities, basically. So they cooperate with Iran. China is potentially huge for Iran. China is a plan B to the nuclear deal with the U.S. China's approach is not that they want to have some sort of alliance with Iran. No, they are very friendly, business friendly with all the countries in the region. So also with Saudis, they need to secure their energy supplies, and they want to pay for energy in something else than dollars. I mean, they don't control the dollars, which means that at some point you could imagine a scenario where they just cannot afford to buy what they require in terms of commodities, right? So they are taking advantage of Iranians' weaker negotiation position and try to persuade Iran to sell oil and get paid in yuan, in Chinese currency. So this is one thing, but China is going further. So look, Iran is obviously on this One Belt, One Road initiative, and already I think 2 or 3 years ago they opened up a train connection. It's a freight train connection between Shanghai and Tehran, so we can ship products very easily. Now they also, and it was announced last year without details yet, that they are talking about a big decade-long investment program that China wants to do in Iran. So they said that China wants to invest $400 billion in Iran's infrastructure, which for Iran is an amazing thing. They need it. I mean, everything that you spend on infrastructure in Iran will be productive. So it will, fuel growth for the next 2 decades. So the Chinese want to build highways, ports, want to, in order to help trade between Asia, between China and Iran and the whole Middle East. $400 billion, it's a lot. I mean, Iran's GDP, it's hard to calculate it when the currency is moving so fast and so dramatically, but it's, I don't know, let's say it's 150 billion right now, anywhere between 100 and 200. So 400 billion is a lot of money. It's bigger than the cohesion funds in the EU that Eastern Europe got from the Western Europe. It's bigger than Marshall Plan, after the Second World War, and most of it would be upfront. So they would spend much more at the beginning than at the end of this 25-year-long period. And also, obviously, Iran needs to pay for it, but they would pay in discounts on oil price, which is great, because otherwise this oil will just stay in the ground, right? They will not be able to sell it because of sanctions, because of whatever, and they can actually get it out of the ground with Chinese help, because Chinese would also invest in the oil production. Okay, fine, they probably sell it at 30% discount or whatever, and this is how they pay for something that they really need. So this is a tremendous opportunity to.
Is that going to go ahead? Where's the latest update on that? Because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah. So a couple of months ago, like fourth quarter last year, the foreign minister of Iran announced the deal as signed, but no details were shown. So we'll see. You don't know. This actually, if this is the case, and this could really go through, this makes Iran's position in talking to the US much stronger, because they actually have a plan B for the first time, in a while.
So if they do accept Chinese money and they get some permission to open up, they're going to get Western capital as well. I mean, that's one hell of a story. If you
that's
the capital.
That would be best of both worlds. So my feeling is that Iranians, their aspirations, they feel closer to the European culture and would like to get more European investment, or Western investment. However, maybe this has changed after JCPOA and after it just didn't work out, and there was a lot of hope. And then it was crushed and it didn't work out. So maybe right now it will be more about, okay, what's the better deal? But they also, what Iranians are saying is that, okay, they are observing every country that makes a deal with China. And many of those countries are not looking great, because they need to leverage a lot, have high debts to pay for the constructions that Chinese require from them, and then have problems and so on. They also see that Chinese are potentially colonizing Africa again, and they would not like to become a colony. There is this very strong sense of strong pride.
To import their own workers into the country to do the work as well. So it's in these African nations, these huge pool of Chinese workers that the locals didn't actually benefit.
So it's not only this, it's not only workers, it's also security forces, right? They will not call it as the Chinese army, but there will be Chinese people with guns on the ground. And this is actually what was hotly really debated in the parliament in Iran, that they don't want, it's a sovereign issue, right? They don't want other troops in the country, right? Then I was having conversations, obviously it's not the same thing, but I was having conversations just showing them in different perspective. And I was saying, look at the Eastern European countries. They compete with each other to have military bases of the US or some other countries, right? So it's a different perspective.
And finally, Russia. How does Russia fit into this as well? Because that's another key player in all of this.
Yes, absolutely. So Iran would like to. So there is the cooperation could be in weapons, for example, sales. So Iran needs to buy weapons. Russia wants to sell it. I think the UN embargo is already gone. So they should be able to make a deal soon. Which obviously the US won't like it. No one will like it, but neither of these countries will care, I guess. Then Russia is helping to sell Iranian oil. So, Russia is selling its own oil, but I guess how they do it is they buy Iranian oil, they use Iranian oil and just sell more of their own oil outside in foreign markets.
Russia's mainly de-dollarized, so there's very limited the US can do about Russia, I guess.
Well, commodity trading is still dollarized, but Russia discovered what Iran discovered many decades ago. So after Russia was put on sanctions, different types of sanctions, and it was difficult to export certain products to Russia, they started producing them themselves. So suddenly many industries are going through a renaissance. I mean, like agricultural, for example, I was meeting some Russians in Moscow and they were complaining that, okay, for some time, we couldn't get a really good cheese, French cheese in Moscow, right? That was a problem. But then they started producing their own, like really, really good cheese. So, or with apples or many different products. So they became more self-sufficient. And, maybe this is the reason why Iranian economy is so diversified and not relying on oil and gas entirely, because they didn't have a choice. They had to develop all those different industries throughout the years, and right now it's a completely different model than the Russian model, for example, which still, in terms of GDP, it relies on commodity sales.
You mentioned before about the potential use of crypto. I think we were talking off camera. Potential use of crypto. We've seen that there's potentially crypto mining starting in Iran, and then using the crypto rails, whether it's stable coins and stuff, to get around the SWIFT thing. What are you seeing or hearing in that regard?
I think this is an obvious way to go, because the main problem for Iranian companies is that they are disconnected from SWIFT for Iranian banks. So this is blocking everything. Even if foreign companies are allowed to do business in Iran, then they cannot get paid, basically. Their Iranian partner, has the money, is ready to pay for the service, product, whatever, but is just unable to make the transfer. And this is such a common problem that it requires a solution. And what seems to be the best solution is crypto, because it doesn't require SWIFT, and you can make transactions using Bitcoin or stable coins. Actually, for paying for settlement transactions, something that is less volatile than Bitcoin is better. So that's why stable coins are becoming popular. So it is actually happening, not on a large scale. So at least I haven't heard about it. But what I did see is that smaller companies, individuals, and then also smaller companies are trading Bitcoin, paying with Bitcoin or stable coins, transferring money. Iranian families that want to help, their families in Iran. So Iranian diaspora that wants to help their families in Iran, they transfer crypto. Companies are getting paid in crypto. So Iranians, initially there was no regulation around it. No one really knew how to treat crypto. Those countries very often have this instinct to regulate things, right? That they want to control, right? So initially they banned crypto, but they changed the legislation. They actually legalized mining. So before, mining was not regulated. Now, then obviously it was great for the miners, because they were taking advantage of highly subsidized electricity rates. I think Bitcoin mining at some point was the most profitable in Iran because the electricity rates were the lowest in the world because of the subsidies, which obviously doesn't make sense in the long term. So it was actually wise that they regulated it. They said, okay, you can do mining, no problem, but you need to pay, some higher electricity rates without the subsidies. And look, and when you think about it, this is like them printing their own hard currency, which they can use to pay to anyone that can then convert it to whatever fiat currency he wants. And you can use such crypto pairs and crypto to fiat crosses that never touch the dollar. And you can go through crypto exchanges that are not located in the US. And then you're not violating sanctions. Obviously, it's all, I guess, traceable and so on. But it's not a problem because you're not doing anything wrong, right? You have this activity that you're allowed from the sanctions perspective to do in Iran. You're investing or trading or whatever with them, and this is just the alternative payment method that you're using. And it's not only for Iran. I mean, obviously, all the countries that have problems with sanctions, like Russia, Venezuela, China, and to some extent maybe as well, they could be using crypto to pay each other.
My final question is, what's the probability that we get the outcome that you and I have been looking for over the next 5 years, that Iran is able to open up a bit more again?
So look, I'm optimistic. I am looking at this long term. Okay, so I think we're gonna get it over the next 5 years. But I actually, something else is more important. You can make a bet that is very asymmetrical. So you don't have to bet on the probability that, yes, I'm super convinced, so I'm going to go and invest in the country. No, the valuations of local assets don't price the good scenario at all.
No.
You had 4 years of Trump. The currency went down by 85%. Well, can it depreciate further? Of course, but unless there is some shock, I wouldn't expect like a big drop of the magnitude that we've seen. Companies are operating under really difficult, in a difficult environment. So under sanctions, with no access to some export markets, with no access, obviously, to international finance, with no access to parts or inputs that they require for in some industries. And they survived. And not only they survived, they're actually managed to grow their earnings, to grow their businesses. Those companies are super resilient. So think about, inventories, working capital, many times bigger than your usual Western companies. So very inefficient, you could say. But this helps them to survive every scenario, right? And still have high margins and so on. So when I look at the country and see what and those companies, what they actually managed to achieve under such tough scenario, under sanctions of the most powerful economy in the world, and then I think, okay, so what happens if this opens up?
Best performing stock markets in dollar terms over the last 5 years with all of that.
Exactly. So what might happen when this opens up? So you're buying those companies right now after the recent correction in the market. You're buying at between 4 times and 6 times forward next year earnings with no debt, no nothing, and the currency already depreciated. So you don't really have to be correct in terms of the probability of the nuclear being signed not to lose money. I mean, it showed you that you can make money even under sanctions. So it's a very asymmetrical, a lot of optionality.
Having seen Russia go through this, which is the great example, or even Poland, and Poland, I think, went up 1,200%. I think Russia did more. I mean, all of these markets, as they open, the opportunity to make money, if they open, is gigantic. So Iran's already been one of the best performing markets over the last 5 years. It's been volatile. But if you get any change, you've probably got a 15x at least opportunity over 10 years. I mean, it's enormous.
No, there will be a bubble. I mean, it's a big market. So all the emerging market funds will want to have a piece of it, right? So we have a lot of passive money going in, a lot of active money, a lot of hedge funds money. But look, so the market in Poland opened up at 3 times earnings. First year, nothing was going on. Then people saw, okay, it's actually a normal country. We can put some money into it, and it went up from 3 times earnings to 30 times earnings. Why not? Plus earnings went up a bit, so 1,200%. Same in China. When they announced the mainland that it would open up, it was still under Tiananmen sanctions. Before it actually opened up, but it was already announced, it went up 3 times, and then after it opened up, an additional 4 times, right? Same in Russia. It was the same story. So this is, it hasn't even started in Iran, right? So the valuations are low. We have all those positive scenarios. Negative scenarios just materialized. It went through, actually in a pretty good shape. So I'm quite excited. Whether this is with Chinese or with the US, I think there will be a deal, but maybe there will be more deals than one.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by the story. And you've written articles for me for Global Macro Investor. You've been on Real Vision, and I just want people to keep it on their radar screens, because trust me, you don't get many of these in your lifetime. When it happens, it's a monster of an opportunity. So that's why I firmly keep on people's radar screens. People say, "Why Iran?" I said, "You'll understand when it opens."
Yeah.
Is you go from a small economy of $150 billion to $1 trillion economy pretty fast, and that is life-changing.
Absolutely. So that's my same view.
Brilliant, my friend. Thank you ever so much for catching us up on all of this. Super interesting as ever.
Great. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay, and good luck. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, thanks. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this special episode of The Interview, the premier business and finance series in the world. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg. For more in-depth content and expert analysis, visit the membership link in the description to unlock a week's access for only $1. This dollar can change your life.